All right, so we'll say good morning. Let us begin. So we are picking up, we are continuing today in Os Mem Gimel in Tzidkas Hatzaddik. So remember again, Reb Tzaddik introduced us to this incredible idea about the nature of the two Yetzaharas. The Yetzahara we'll call the innate Yetzahara, the one which HaKadosh Baruch Hu places inside of us, versus we'll call it the acquired or created Yetzahara, which is often the compounded Yetzahara that we create for ourselves and is often reinforced and becomes very powerful through continuous or ongoing bad or negative decisions. And Hatzaddik pointed out that whereas the Yetzahara that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives me is certainly conquerable, but sometimes again the Yetzahara that I create for myself becomes so powerful that there is potentially this concept that I'm unable to overcome it. So with that, we're going to pick up. We're on page still Tzaddik Ches. Tzaddik Ches. So the last two shiurim, we focused on the Hakdama, we focused on the introduction. Now we're going to begin actual Reb Tzaddik, but we're going to learn it inside of the Be'uri HaChasidus. So he writes over here as follows. Bottom of page Tzaddik Ches. Sometimes as a result of specific divine providence from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yesh Matzav Shebo Ha'adam Omin B'nisayon Gadol Ma'od Machmas Hiskabrus HaYetzahara. So I will say, so sometimes a person finds himself in an incredible predicament, an overwhelming test. But this test, understand, is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself as well. I was about to say, sometimes there are different types of nisyonos in life, and this goes with what Reb Tzaddik is saying. Sometimes I find myself b'makom nisayon because I placed myself in a bad situation. I placed myself in bad circumstances, and sometimes I find myself b'makom nisayon in a situation of a test because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has placed me there. Now, of course, on a grand level, every nisayon I encounter comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But look what he writes. He says, Machmas Hiskarbos Yetzahara, V'anisayon lachto hu gadol kol kach. And the temptation to sin is so intense, Ad she'afshar shelo yechta. Ad she'afshar shelo yechta. Both say to the point, says Reb Tzaddik, that not sinning is virtually impossible. So these words are incredibly overwhelming to hear, right? Because it really flies in the face of our thinking. I think up until we saw Tzidkas Hatzaddik Os Mem Gimel, up until we saw this Os, we made the assumption that there's no such thing as a temptation you can't overcome. There's no such thing as an isayon that you can't overcome. And now says Reb Tzaddik, no, that's not necessarily the case. That sometimes a person comes to a situation, ad she'i afshar lo shelo yechta. It's almost impossible that I'm not going to sin. For one simple reason. So I will say, this is quite fascinating. The ability to overcome any particular nisayon is all dependent on my internal personalistic strength. Well, sometimes a person lacks the requisite strength. It happens. In other words, we'll say that strength comes from somewhere. Right? That strength comes from something. That strength ultimately, again, comes from a building up of myself. Well, sometimes I haven't sufficiently built myself up. That's just the metzias. Sometimes I'm just not ready to be omid b'nisayon. It's not that I'm lazy. It's not that I'm weak. It's not that I'm uninterested. I'm just not prepared. I'm just not prepared. He goes on. He gives an incredible mashal. Levair, page Tzaddik Tes. Levair es hamatzov shebo nichshelu Yisrael b'cheta egos. We'll say, Reb Tzaddik chooses to illustrate this with the cheta egos, so the golden calf. So the Gemara gives a great mashal. The Gemara says, Mashal li adam shahayelo bein. This could be comparable to a person who had a son. Hirchitzu, v'sachol, v'echilo, v'heshkeu. So the father pampers his son very much. Right? He makes sure that he's always properly bathed, anointed with oil, well fed, only drinks the nicest wine. V'talalo kis al tzavaro. So the child is very pampered. He then takes the young man, he puts a bag of money around his neck, v'oshivo al pesach shel zonos, and then puts him at the entranceway of a brothel. Okay, so the Gemara says, Ma yasa osa ben shelo yechta. is it possible that this young man is not going to sin? And I will say, what's the pshat here? So meaning the son has led a very pleasure-filled life. Very pleasure-filled life. His father takes very good care of him. There's absolutely no problems. Now again, he's there with a bag of money. He's a young man. He has desires. He's at the entrance of the brothel. Do you think that he has the ability to resist that temptation to sin? And so the answer, the Gemara doesn't answer, but the answer, of course, is no. No, he's not going to have that temptation. He's not going to have the ability to resist that temptation. So we'll say, so what is the Gemara trying to illustrate? So according to Hatzaddik, what is the Gemara trying to illustrate? The Gemara is illustrating that sometimes a Yetzer Hara could be so intense that you can't overcome it. See, we've seen that Gemara because Rashi quotes that Gemara. Actually, again, in the footnotes, Mekaros Tziyunim, this Gemara is quoted by Rashi in Devarim Aleph Aleph, the meaning of Devarim, B'di Zahav. So there, we often assume that this Gemara was like Moshe Rabbeinu's defense of Klal Yisrael, which it was. Right? This Moshe Rabbeinu's defense of Klal Yisrael for building the golden calf. But like many times that Moshe defends Klal Yisrael, it's a defense and it's a wonderful form of advocacy. But sometimes, like, we see it and we say, okay, like Moshe's saying good, but Lamaisa, it's not all that compelling. It's not all that compelling because Klal Yisrael still has responsibility. According to the Gemara, Moshe Rabbeinu was saying to Kadosh Baruch Hu is they had no choice, but they almost could not fight the Yetzer Hara to build the golden calf. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you had taken care of them every step of the moment. You had given them, they were slaves, they became emancipated. You blessed them with abundant wealth, with absolutely no effort. What did you think was going to happen the moment that things went badly? Right? The moment that they felt you were no longer there, they would simply rely on what they felt was the next most dependable thing. But say most people's minds, what's the most dependable thing after God in your life? Your money. At the end of the day, that's the deal. After, of course, I believe in Hakadosh Baruch Hu, but after Hakadosh Baruch Hu, the thing that gives me security in life is my bank account, is my possessions, is my money. So Moshe was saying, what did you think was going to happen at Hakadosh Baruch Hu? There was a moment of crisis. They thought I was dead. They didn't know what was going on. So Moshe was saying they were unable to withstand this challenge. Don't see what Moshe was saying to Hakadosh Baruch Hu was, you can't really be angry at them, because they had no ability to combat this Yetzer Hara. But what an incredible thing. They're no different than the well-pampered young man with a bag of money at the entranceway to the brothel. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to write the end of that story. You know where that's going to go. So therefore, again, Moshe Rabbeinu is advocate. They had no ability to overcome the Yetzer Hara. He goes on, he says, over Maisezeh, Sha'osa Adam Mikoach Pitui Azim Shel Yetzer Hara, Hu Nechshav Anas Kamar. So sometimes when a person is so overwhelmed by his Yetzer Hara and he has an inability to fight it, he's considered to be an ones. He's considered to be extenuating circumstances. Shamru Chazal alav dirachmana patre. Now both say, what's the halacha of an ones, right? Of an ones, extenuating circumstances, you are exempt. Shatora patrasa mikolonesh ve'ino nitzrach klal lekapara al maisezeh. Suppose say this is a very, very dramatic idea. Now, again, let's point out something here. How do you get to a Yetzer Hara like this? This is very important. So here, Reb Tzaddik is introducing us to this idea that there could be a Yetzer Hara that is so strong that you literally lack the wherewithal, you lack the ability to overcome it. That the fact that you sinned, you're not responsible because you had no way to combat this. But it's very important. How do you get to a sin like this? How do you get to a sin like this? Or I should say, how do you get to Yetzer Hara like this? Remember, you don't stumble upon that by accident. That's all. So use the mashal. So remember, at the end of the day, the young man had to put himself at the entranceway of the brothel. Right? Meaning, at the end of the day, it's true. Once he's at the entranceway of the brothel and he's well pampered and as pleasure-seeking young man has a bag of money, sure, we know how this is going to go, and it's almost as if there's no other end to the story. But Lamaisa, he still had to get to the entranceway of the brothel, right? It's not just the pshat that he just, either his father put him there, or he put himself there. So remember, how do you get to this point in life where you have a Yetzer Hara that in Reb Tzaddik says is inconquerable? Remember, I have the responsibility for getting there. It's just once I got there, what then happens becomes a process that is beyond my control. But again, and therefore I'm exempt. At the end of the day, says Reb Tzaddik, but how did you get there? How did you get there? So I might not be responsible for the final act, the final Aveira, because it's just too overwhelming. I can't combat the Yetzer Hara. But I didn't just suddenly show up at the threshold of this Nisayon with no warning. I got to the threshold, I got to the entrance of the brothel because of a whole series of bad mistakes. Now, unfortunately, I'm there, and I'm so overwhelmed, I can't fight this Yetzer Hara. So we'll say an incredible Yisod. So as much, so, and you know, by Chita Ego, sin the golden calf. Well, let's remember again, how did the Jewish people get to the sin of the golden calf? How did it happen? So remember again, go back. It started when they complained against Moshe and HaKadosh Baruch Hu by the banks of the Red Sea, right? That's where it started. And then it was compounded again by Mara, by the bitter waters. And then it was compounded again by the complaint about food. So now a whole bunch of smaller mistakes created an inconquerable Yetzer Hara. But again, so therefore, at the end of the day, Moshe Rabbeinu says, you can't hold them accountable for the sin of the golden calf. And the truth is, it sounds like HaKadosh Baruch Hu agreed with Moshe Rabbeinu, because he did not wipe out Klal Yisrael. But at the end of the day, there is personal responsibility for the series of small mistakes that got me to that point. So I may be exempt for the final manifestation of that inconquerable Yetzer Hara. It's an ones, but Lamaisa, how I get there requires an incredible amount of introspection. We'll have to stop over here for today. We're going to continue Meretz Hashem and Os Mem Gimel tomorrow, because I will say this is a major theological novel idea that Reb Tzaddik is advancing, which requires some more limud. Meretz Hashem tomorrow.